Now, as I'm sure you can now see, this game was just 1,000 times more impressive than the original. Hell, to this day, this game looks better than almost any other Resident Evil game to date, even Resident Evil 6, which, I mean, it just came out basically. Granted, this game is mostly pre-rendered, which helps the backdrops look so photorealistic, but being 11 years old and looking as good as games now, that's damn impressive. The environments are so much more alive, and it's not just the visual style. Like I said in the original, sound has so much to do with these two games. Your footsteps were not just the same non-stop clickety-clack repeated over and over. You could hear the floorboards creaking, the musty carpets under your feet, the footsteps going from sounding like boots on metal floors to carpets, even hearing glass crack under your feet in sections, or hearing where bloodstains or pools of blood splashed and soaked into the carpet. I know it can sound rather dark and super descriptive, but that's how great the sound was. And that didn't even add in the storm at night, the zombies' grunts and howls, the dogs barking, wind blowing through the trees, the sound of waterfalls in the courtyard. The environment was so alive, and in a dark room, the world felt so real, and it just wrapped you up even more so than it did with the original. I know this was stuff I covered in the first game, but it really shows you just how much more improved this game has become. Everyone loves Easter eggs in games. There weren't really too many that I caught specifically in this game. There is a lot throughout the series, and maybe one day down the road I could do like a one Resident Evil Easter egg coverage of all Resident Evil games, because there are some really cool ones. But there was only kind of one that I ran in here, and I don't know if I would technically call it an Easter egg. But in the game you collected MO discs. You kind of don't really know what they're for until the end of the game. There's 3 MO discs in the game, I believe, and if you get all 3, it releases a person from prison that's in a prison cell at the end of the game. But the cool thing was that in the game, the MO disc reader was straight up a freaking GameCube. Check that out. But it's still cool that it pays a tribute to the GameCube. I mean, honestly, as nerdy as I am with Resident Evil, I wish I had a spare GameCube so I could make it into an MO disc reader. But then I'm pretty sure when my friends would come over, they would go, "Oh, 2 GameCubes, could I have the one that says MO disc reader? Could I borrow that?" They would never know what a MO disc reader is, so I probably won't do that. No, I won't. Another thing worth talking about before I talk about the game's story would definitely be the health system. As I said in the first review, you had to actually physically pause the game to see your health. There you could see your heartbeat and you could monitor it. It worked itself down from green, yellow to red. I don't think I need to explain what happens when it's red, and the heartbeat would get more and more minimalistic as it got to red, and then of course you would die. And honestly, in the old game, this could become a pain because every time you had to check or wanted to check your health, you had to press pause, which kind of took you out of the atmosphere of the sounds and noises of the mansion and just the eerie, because it took you out, and then you had, all you could see was the heartbeat in your items, and it would doo-doo, doo-doo, or I don't know the sound, but it did take away from that environment. And I wouldn't say that's the worst thing I've ever experienced in a game, because it was a unique new way of checking your health in a video game. But like I said, I felt it took you out of the atmosphere that you need to be absorbed into. So here in the remake, it worked, mostly the same way. You would have to pause the game and see your health and heal from within, but you didn't have to base it off this method. When your character got down in lower health, they would hold their stomach, and their movement would become slower as they walked. This made the character more lifelike, but it told the player, hey, go check your life, it's getting low. It saved you the numerous checkups of having to press pause. This also applied to you if you had been poisoned. The first contact of poison, your player held himself immediately, or herself, in pain. Now, I didn't really dive into herbs in the last video because I have a lot of thoughts on that. And I know I'm not the only one to think this, but I just kind of want to touch base with you and help you understand what goes through my brain. Now, there's 2 ways that you can heal yourself in Resident Evil. There's herbs, and there's first aid sprays. The first aid sprays are more rare, and they actually heal more of your life. You spray it directly on yourself, da-da-da, that's it. And now the herbs were a bit different, though. As you can tell just playing this game, they really wanted you to feel alone, limited ammo, limited resources, lots of zombies, just everything about it, just isolation, survival. So with the herbs, there was 3 specific colors for herbs in this game. There was green, red, and blue. As the game's franchise went on, there was other herbs introduced, yellow, but anyways, that doesn't matter for this game. So you would collect these, and by mixing them, it could create different effects, which was really realistic. Not only that, but when you ran across them, you learned to save them because you knew that you could build them up and combine them at a later point to have better health, or a better way to juggle your inventory. Knowing that you had to carry 3 herbs, you just lost 3 inventory slots, so you really had to stop and think, and I thought that was a great feature.
Red and green worked for strong hills, green alone was just a small hill, and mixing blue in could cure any poison. Most herbs have to be mixed with green or they cannot be used alone. It was a decent addition, which to this day it still lives as a prominent aspect of Resident Evil. My issue with this, though, was this. When you find the green herbs, it freaking looks like a pot plant. Does it not? But it doesn't stop there. To use the herb, you mix it with other herbs by grinding it down into a powder-like substance. Oh, and when you do this, it's even on a small joint paper. Now in the game, all you do is press A, and you're healed. You don't see the player really using this. So when I first saw this, I always just had this visual of the characters rolling that paper and smoking those herbs. I mean, how else did they use it?
It just doesn't make sense any other way. I mean, I guess they could use it as a bandage and put it on their boo-boo, but in the game it was an immediate result. So yeah, that's what I think. And I'm sure you do too. There were a few new things added here and there. A few puzzles were changed up a bit to add variety. A few new puzzles were added. The rest just felt like a beautiful world of deja vu. The last 2 things I want to touch on, though, would reflect and deal with the story. The first being William Birkin, and then the second being Trevor's story. Now again, remember, as I discuss these, and like I said in the previous reviews, I may discuss spoilers. I'm forewarning you now, if you don't want to hear spoilers, go play, go do things, but don't watch me. Yes. So as I talked about in the last review, you felt like there was a traitor in the STARS group. And of course, as you go down the road, you find out it's Albert Wesker, who is your captain. It's really kind of obvious, so it's not really a spoiler, because this asshole wears sunglasses at night, in a mansion, during a storm, in dimly lighted hallways. I mean, please explain to me what crazy person would wear sunglasses 24/7. He's gotta be bad. You kind of get the idea from the first game that Albert Wesker is working alone. You do know that Barry Burton ends up being tricked into helping Albert Wesker because he actually tells Barry Burton, "Yo, Umbrella has your family, and the Umbrella's gonna kill him unless you help me." And so Barry Burton, of course, kind of becomes a traitor to STARS, but with a justified reason. But in this game here, that was remade, they actually threw in William Birkin, who is from the second game, who was making the G-Virus, which is the focal point of Resident Evil 2. But you realize that Albert and Birkin worked together originally for Umbrella, and they were the ones that kind of got all this shit all over the place. So it kind of ties in and makes Resident Evil 2 fit more perfectly with Resident Evil 1, and it ties Albert Wesker to go throughout the rest of the series, if that makes sense. So really, that was a nice touch, and they explained how Albert and Birkin used to be friends and associates. So it makes a lot more sense. And I will touch base on the G-Virus in a second, and of course in the Resident Evil 2 review, but right now let's move on from there. And honestly, if you were going to experience the Resident Evil franchise for the story, I highly recommend playing Remake as opposed to the original. The original definitely is a classic, but the remake is just done so much more better. The voice acting, the music, the atmosphere, the graphics, the story, it's just more solid, and it just fits perfectly with the rest of the franchise.
For the most part, the game ends the same way as the original, and you have the ability to have a few different endings by getting other members out to safety with you, such as Becca Chambers or Barry Burton, who actually pulls through in the end for you when he realized Wesker was using him as a pawn. You can always count on a man with a sexy beard. Wesker, of course, gets raped by a tyrant. You find out his overall goal was to test the T-Virus and the BOWs on a trained team, which was you and the Stars, and then you are left to defeat the tyrant and escape with whomever you saved before the mansion is blown up to cover up Umbrella's research. That's really all I want to discuss for the sake of future reviews, but the rest you can learn by playing or replaying the game. When the game is beat too, you can also unlock costumes, which later become a very popular thing to do in the Resident Evil series. It's nothing too great, but for those die-hard Jill fans who love to look up skirts of polygon characters, don't worry. That can be accomplished with Jill's unlock of her clothes from Nemesis.
Pervert man. You dirty pervert, you whore bag.
Trevor Clark has had his say to help you find good games to play. Game reviews, tattoos, and news. Pwning noobs you'll never lose with Trevor.